It was a Friday night, just past 7, and I was weaving through a parking lot packed with Autos, Teslas, and Mercedes, feeling like a sore thumb in a suit that cost less than one of these cars' tire replacements. My name's Adrian. I'm 32. I live in Chicago and I've been a paramedic for nearly a decade. Tonight, though, I wasn't here for a call. I was here to surprise my girlfriend. Tessa worked in corporate development at Langford Biotech, and tonight was her company's annual gala, held at a luxury car dealership showroom of all places, very on-brand for a firm that loved to flaunt its success. I hated these events. I never felt like I belonged. But tonight was different. Tonight I had news. After months of double shifts and buried paperwork, I'd finally closed on a 2-bedroom apartment just 10 minutes from the hospital. Our first home. Modest, sure, but stable. Ours. I wanted to tell her in person, see her face when I handed her the keys. I pictured her smile, the way she'd bury her face in my chest, whispering finally, the way we'd both been dreaming of. Inside, the place gleamed with soft lighting, jazz piano, and high heels clicking on polished tile. People floated past in dresses and designer suits, sipping champagne, laughing like they'd never had a bad day in their lives. I stood by the entrance for a second, adjusting my collar and hoping the cheap fabric didn't wrinkle too obviously. I looked around, trying to spot her. Then I saw her. Tessa stood near a blood-red Aston Martin, holding a flute of champagne and laughing politely at something a tall man in a tailored charcoal suit had said. Her hair was swept up, her lips painted in the soft red I always loved. She looked incredible, out of my league, always had. The man beside her was older, distinguished, silver hair, charming smile. I recognized him from company newsletters she'd shown me, Richard Langford, the CEO himself. I started walking toward them, but something made me stop just before I reached earshot. Richard's hand was on the small of her back. Not in a professional way. More like someone who didn't care about crossing lines because he was used to owning the room. Tessa didn't push him away. She just gave a nervous smile and took another sip of her drink. I was thinking, Richard said, his voice smooth and easy. We could extend the Tokyo conference into the weekend. You deserve a little R&R after the panel. You've been killing it. Tessa laughed, but it was tight. That might be a little complicated. He leaned in slightly. Only if you want it to be. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She looked down, swirled her drink. I stood there, frozen. That conference had been on her calendar for weeks. She'd mentioned the Tokyo trip in passing, always vague. Now I knew why. My chest felt tight, like I'd been sucker punched. I backed away before either of them could see me. The keys in my pocket suddenly felt heavier than before. I had come to share our future, but it seemed like she was already planning something else. I finally caught Tessa near the dessert bar, halfway through a conversation with a woman in a shimmery silver dress. She didn't see me right away, so I watched her for a moment, just to confirm what I already felt. She looked tense. Her laugh wasn't real, too sharp, too rehearsed. I stepped forward and touched her elbow gently. Hey! She turned, and her smile dropped for a second before she caught herself. Adrian? What are you doing here? I pulled the envelope from my inner pocket and held it up, still trying to stay upbeat. Closed this morning. Everything went through. The keys are ours. Her eyes widened, but not in the way I expected. Not the joy, not the relief. Instead, it was something closer to alarm. Oh, she said, glancing around. Wow, that's great. You okay? I asked. You seem surprised. I didn't know you were coming. You didn't RSVP. It's just, the guest list was kind of tight. That stung more than I wanted it to. I let it slide. I wanted it to be a surprise. She looked past me for a second, then gave a polite laugh. Well, consider me surprised. I smiled, trying to salvage the moment. It's a 2-bed like we wanted. Needs a bit of paint, but it's solid. Close to the hospital, enough space if you start working from home more. Everything's official. We can move in anytime. That flicker of warmth returned, briefly. Her eyes softened, and she stepped closer, touching my lapel. You really did it? I nodded. I really did. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something. Maybe thank me. Maybe apologize for earlier. But then we both heard it. A voice from behind us. "There he is," said Richard Langford, gliding up with a bourbon in hand and that same smug confidence he'd had earlier. "You must be Adrian, the EMT boyfriend, right?" "Paramedic," I corrected, shaking his hand. Firm but short. He smiled like I'd said something quaint. Right. Tessa's mentioned you. Brave work. Lots of blood and sirens. Must be intense." I didn't like the way he said it. Like I was a novelty. A rescue dog at a cocktail party. "I enjoy the job," I said. "Keeps me grounded." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Grounded? That's good. God knows we need more of that in the biotech world, huh?" He sipped his drink, then turned to Tessa. "I need to steal you for a few more introductions. You know how these things are, circulation is key." Tessa hesitated, then looked at me with a faint apologetic smile. "Can we talk later? I really want to hear more about the place." "Sure," I said, the excitement bleeding out of my voice. "Go network." She gave my hand a quick squeeze and walked off with him, heels clicking like a countdown. I turned back to the bar and ordered a whiskey neat. "Rough night?" someone asked from the stool next to me. I glanced over. A woman, maybe early 50s, elegant in a charcoal dress, hair swept into a simple bun. She had the kind of composure you don't learn, you inherit it. She sipped a gin and tonic, her eyes studying me like she already knew the answer. "I was hoping it wouldn't be," I said. She smiled without warmth. "Langford has that effect." I looked at her. "You know him?" "Oh, I know him better than he'd like me to." She extended a hand. "Clarissa Langford. Soon-to-be ex-wife." I shook her hand slowly, processing that. "Adrian." She nodded toward the dance floor where Tessa and Richard were now mingling with investors. "You're dating the blonde in the blue dress, right?" "Yeah." Clarissa tilted her head, watching them. "Then I'd keep both eyes open, Adrian. Richard's good at pretending things are innocent until they're not." "Tokyo conference, right?" My stomach dropped. "How did you?" "Please," she said dryly. "It always starts with a conference." She took another sip, her tone casual but razor-sharp. "Don't let the designer suits fool you. Underneath, they're just boys who never learn to lose." "Tessa's smart, but smart doesn't always mean safe." "You saying she's?" "I'm saying she's in deep," Clarissa interrupted. "And when it all goes up in flames, he'll throw her under the bus like he did the others." She met my eyes. "If you're smart, Adrian, you'll get out before it costs you more than just a lease agreement." She stood and walked off without another word. I looked back at the floor, at Tessa and Richard, her hand on his arm now as he whispered something into her ear. And just like that, the apartment keys in my pocket felt like dead weight. I was halfway through my second whiskey when it happened. A loud crash echoed through the showroom, the kind of sound that made conversations stall mid-sentence and heads whip around. Near the entrance, a man in a wrinkled blazer stood with his arm outstretched, a tipped-over champagne tower at his feet. His face was flushed, sweaty, and furious. "Don't touch me," he barked at a security guard. "I have a right to be here. I used to work for you people." There was a pause, an awkward, confused hush before he pointed a trembling finger straight at Richard Langford. "You ruined my life," he shouted. "You and your bullshit trials. You knew they were killing people." People gasped. A woman clutched her pearls. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, is that?" Richard remained calm, stepping forward with his hands out like he was talking down a drunk relative. "Michael," he said smoothly, "let's not make a scene." The man laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "A scene? You think this is a scene? You ran illegal trials. You doctored the results. I saw the projections. You covered up the deaths. I watched from the bar, heart pounding." I glanced at Tessa. She was 2 steps behind Richard, her face pale but composed. Her arms were crossed tightly over her stomach. Her eyes scanned the room quickly, not frightened, not curious. Calculating. Then she made eye contact with Richard. He didn't say a word. Just gave her a slight nod. She turned and started walking briskly toward the back hall. I straightened up. Clarissa appeared beside me again like smoke. "There it is," she murmured, eyes on her soon-to-be ex-husband. Public implosion always comes right after unchecked arrogance. "You know this guy?" I asked. "He's a whistleblower. Used to head one of their research divisions. Vanished after a mental health leave. Guess we know why. Security tried to grab the man, Michael, but he shoved one of them off, knocking over a display pedestal. "I have documents," he shouted. "Emails. Financials. You think I'm crazy, but I'm not. He's a fraud," and he pointed at Tessa's now vacant spot. She helped. More murmurs. People backing away. Some reaching for their phones. Clarissa leaned closer to me, her voice like a knife wrapped in velvet. I'm taking him down. You should know that. I figured. If she's involved, she trailed off, sipped her gin. Well, I suppose she'll go with him. Michael was finally dragged out, still shouting about trial data and patient deaths. One of the bartenders righted the champagne tower. The string quartet started playing again like it would magically erase what had just happened. But it wouldn't. My eyes followed the hallway Tessa had disappeared into. Something wasn't right, more than just a scandal or a nervous PR crisis. She had looked too calm, too practiced. Without thinking, I followed. Down the corridor, past the VIP clients-only sign, into a quieter part of the dealership. The jazz faded behind me, replaced by the echo of my own footsteps. I moved quickly, each step heavier than the last. I wasn't sure what I expected to find, but I knew I had to see it for myself. The hallway curved sharply behind a frosted glass wall. I kept my steps light, barely breathing. The lighting changed here, dimmer, more ambient, like this part of the dealership wasn't meant for public eyes. I passed a row of locked office doors before I heard voices. A low murmur, urgent and hushed. I stopped at the last door, slightly ajar. Through the narrow gap, I saw them. Tessa stood with her back to me, arms folded across her chest. Richard was pacing, one hand dragging down his face, the other clutching a tumbler of something dark. I told you, she said sharply. We need to be careful now. That was the last thing we needed tonight. He scoffed, shaking his head. He's a drunk burnout. No one listens to lunatics in rumpled suits. He's got documents, Rich. You heard him. If he releases those files. Richard waved it off. We'll bury it. We've done it before. PR will spin it, legal will threaten him with breach of contract, same playbook. Tessa leaned against the wall, her voice quieter now. I didn't sign up for this part. Richard turned, his tone sharp. Yes, you did. She flinched. You wanted Tokyo, you wanted the seat at the table. Don't get squeamish now, he said, stepping closer. You helped those numbers look good. You knew what the projections were. You stood beside me in the meetings, remember? Her voice dropped to a whisper. We were faking patient data. And, he shot back, eyes narrowing. Do you think those investors care about ethics? They care about results. You wanted a career, this is the cost. She hesitated, then looked down. What if it all comes out? He set his drink down. It won't. Unless someone decides to grow a conscience. That was enough. I pushed the door open. Both their heads snapped toward me. Tessa's eyes widened like she'd seen a ghost. Richard's expression barely changed, just narrowed slightly, sizing me up. How long have you been standing there? He asked, cool and calm. Long enough. Tessa stepped forward. Adrian. No, I said, holding up a hand. Don't. She looked like she wanted to speak but didn't know where to start. Richard just leaned against the edge of the desk, sipping what was left in his glass like this was all perfectly routine. I pulled the apartment key from my pocket and held it between my fingers. I came here tonight to tell you I closed on our place. I was going to surprise you. She swallowed hard. I didn't know. You didn't care, I said, voice tight. You were too busy managing projections and hiding in back rooms with this guy. Richard chuckled softly. You really think this is about some apartment? I ignored him. Was it just Tokyo? Or were you two already you? Tessa exhaled like the air had left her completely. It started before Tokyo. My jaw clenched. How long? Since the Geneva trip, she whispered. Last year. That hit harder than I expected. I stared at her for a moment, waiting for something, a reason, an apology, even a lie. All she gave me was silence. I stepped forward and placed the key gently on the desk between them. I'll take care of my half of the mortgage paperwork in the morning. You can buy me out or sell it. Adrian, please, she said, eyes brimming now. It was never about love. It was stress. Fear. He made it sound like. No, I cut in. You made choices. And now you get to live with them. I turned and walked out, my footsteps echoing louder than before. Behind me, the door clicked shut. And just like that, I was done. I moved in with Sam 2 days later. He had a spare room in his place in Logan Square, and he didn't ask questions. Just helped me carry in my duffel bag and handed me a beer. You good? He asked. Not really, I said, dropping onto his couch. But I'm here. He nodded, and that was enough. I didn't respond to Tessa's messages. Not the 3 texts that came in that first night, not the long email that hit my inbox the next morning, and definitely not the voicemail she left at 3 a.m., her voice hoarse like she'd been crying. She said she needed to explain. That things got complicated. That she never meant to hurt me. I didn't care. Whatever feelings I had left were buried under the weight of her betrayal. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the deception, the manipulation, the way she looked me in the eye for months while helping a man like Langford lie to people who trusted them with their health. I threw myself into work. Back-to-back shifts. 12 hours on the ambulance with barely a minute to think. Blood, broken bones, overdoses, cardiac arrests, real problems. Not corporate vanity. Then one night, about 2 weeks later, she showed up. It was close to midnight. I was at the depot finishing up my shift report when I saw her standing by the chain-link fence out back, arms wrapped around herself, her hair damp from the rain. I almost turned and walked the other way. But she saw me. "Adrian," she called softly. "Please." I exhaled and walked over, stopping a few feet away. "I just need 5 minutes." I crossed my arms. "You've had years." She flinched. "I messed up. I know that. I wanted to see you. Talk face to face." I said nothing. "I never loved him," she said. "I swear to you. It was never about that. It was stress, pressure, I was drowning and he made me feel You don't owe me an explanation," I said. "I'm not here for a relationship recap." She looked down, swallowing hard. "So what now?" I reached into my jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This is the buyout amount. My half of the down payment adjusted for the closing costs I paid. You can either transfer the funds and keep the place or list it and split the sale. Either way, we settle this like adults. No more texts. No more calls." She took the envelope slowly, her fingers trembling. "That's it? That's it?" She blinked quickly. "I thought maybe if you heard it from me, maybe you'd understand." "I do," I said quietly. "I understand exactly who you are now." And with that, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. Not when she called my name again. Not when her voice cracked into a sob. Not even when I heard her footsteps shuffle away into the dark. It was over. All of it. And this time, there was no saving it. About a month passed. I was getting used to the quiet. The kind that creeps in after a storm. No more late-night messages, no voicemails I didn't want to hear. Just me, Sam's dog snoring by the couch, and the occasional ache in my chest when I forgot, just for a second, that life had changed. Then I got the call. It came in on a Tuesday, right after lunch. I had just finished a back-to-back double and was lying flat on Sam's floor, trying to remember why I ever wanted to work overtime. Unknown number. I nearly let it go to voicemail. "Adrian Moore," a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Speaking. This is Melanie Jarvis with the National Medical Board. I was wondering if you'd be willing to provide a statement about your interactions with employees of Langford Biotech, specifically regarding knowledge of trial misconduct or data fabrication." I sat up fast. "I'm sorry, what?" "We've been reviewing a case tied to former executive Richard Langford and several of his associates. Your name came up through a cooperating witness." I was quiet for a moment. "Who?" There was a pause on her end. "I can't disclose full details, but Tessa Blake has provided preliminary statements implicating other parties in exchange for limited immunity." I closed my eyes. Of course. Tessa had flipped. She was cutting a deal. Saving herself before the whole ship went under. "We're reaching out to individuals who may have insight or corroborating information," Melanie continued. "You're not under investigation, just someone who might help us understand the scope." I agreed to meet her later that week. I didn't know how much I could really offer, but I wanted to be part of whatever brought Langford down. And I wanted to know just how deep Tessa's part had gone. I didn't have to wait long. That same night, Clarissa Langford showed up at Sam's place. She knocked like she knew I'd be home. No text, no call. Just a firm rap on the door and her standing there in a trench coat with a manila envelope under one arm. "I thought you might want to see this," she said, brushing past me into the living room. "What is it?" "Proof." She sat on the edge of the couch and dropped the envelope on the table. "Emails, internal memos, financial transfers. Enough to bury them. Tessa included." I stared at her. "Why me?" She shrugged. "You're not corporate. You're not invested. And you still care about the truth. Even if it hurts." I opened the envelope. It was worse than I expected. Tessa hadn't just signed off on bad projections. She'd actively rewritten them. Draft after draft of skewed trial outcomes, reworded emails pushing internal departments to focus on marketable efficacy over statistical noise. She even sent a note to Richard during the Geneva trip: "We can pad the final month results if the dropout rate stays consistent. I'll handle the charts. Keep legal out of it for now." The affair had started before Geneva. The fraud had started long before that. She hadn't been manipulated. She'd been complicit. I sat there in stunned silence while Clarissa poured herself a glass of wine from Sam's counter like she lived there. "She made her choices," she said. "Now she'll live with them." I nodded slowly. The pit in my stomach had turned into a cold certainty. Tessa wasn't just someone who broke my heart. She was someone who helped break people's lives. And no matter how many tears she cried, no matter what she tried to say, there was no coming back from that. She reached out again about a week later. I was off shift, standing in line at a food truck with Sam when I got the text. Just a simple message. Tessa, can we talk? Just one time. Please. I didn't reply right away. I finished my sandwich, drove home, took a shower, sat on it. Then finally I wrote back. Me, 1 hour. Cafe Verona. Tomorrow. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table in the back with 2 coffees, one black, just how I used to take it. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun. No makeup. She looked tired. Not just physically, like her soul had been wrung out. Hey, she said quietly as I sat down. I nodded. You've got one shot at this. Say what you need to say. She didn't waste time. I didn't come to ask you for anything, she started, hands cupped around the paper cup. Not forgiveness. Not sympathy. I just want to explain. Not because I think it'll fix anything, I know it won't, but because I want you to understand how it happened. I let her talk. She told me about the pressure. The late nights. The fear of losing everything she'd worked for if she didn't play along. How Richard made it sound normal, how everyone did it. How she got used to hearing lies and calling them strategy. She talked about the affair like it had been some twisted survival tactic, not love, not even lust. Just proximity and power and weakness in the worst possible mix. He knew exactly how to corner people, she said. He picked out the ones who had ambition and just enough doubt. He didn't threaten. He seduced you into thinking you were part of something untouchable. And you went along with it, I said. She nodded. I did. I made the choices. I'm not running from that. A pause. I miss you, she whispered. Not the apartment or the plans or the version of us I tried to protect. Just you. The way you made me feel grounded. Safe. Seen. I looked at her, really looked. For a moment I saw the woman I'd once loved. The laugh lines. The way her fingers curled around the coffee like they used to curl around my arm when she fell asleep beside me. But it was too late. You want honesty? I said. Here it is. I believe you regret it. I believe it broke you more than you'll admit. But it wasn't a single mistake. It was 100 little betrayals stacked on top of each other. Lies, cover-ups, gaslighting. I could forgive one. I can't forgive the pattern. Her eyes welled up. She didn't speak. I stood, dropping a few bills on the table for the coffee I barely touched. I hope you figure out who you were without him, I said. But I'm done being part of that journey. And I walked out, leaving her in the quiet hum of the cafe, surrounded by strangers and silence. Whatever closure she was looking for, she'd have to find it alone. 1 year later, I found myself at another gala. Only this time, it wasn't in a sterile luxury showroom surrounded by overpriced suits and whispered fraud. It was a fundraiser for Midwest disaster relief held in the back room of a refurbished brewery on the edge of Lincoln Park. Exposed brick, Christmas lights strung overhead, and a jazz trio playing in the corner. The air smelled like wood smoke and IPA. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't exclusive. But it was real. I came with Elise. We met 6 months ago at a disaster response seminar up in Minneapolis. She was there covering the training for an independent photojournalism piece, camera always in hand, notebook in her back pocket, quick to laugh at anything self-serious. She wore combat boots and a sarcastic smile and asked more questions than anyone else in the room. I liked her immediately. We didn't fall into anything fast. It started with texts. Then late-night walks. A weekend volunteering together after a tornado in Kansas. And now here we were at an event I didn't feel the need to escape from. Okay, Elise said, nudging me with her elbow as we stood near the donation table. You've officially spent the last 15 minutes pretending to be invisible. That's your quota. Come dance. I smirked. I don't dance. That's adorable, she said, grabbing my hand anyway. You do now. She pulled me out onto the floor, if you could call the open space near the beer taps a dance floor, and started swaying in that unbothered, confident way that made people watch her without realizing they were doing it. I followed, clumsy at first, until her laughter relaxed me. You're really bad at this, she said, grinning. I save lives, I said. Not rhythms. You can do both, she teased. Don't limit yourself. I laughed. Really laughed. Later, we sat outside on the brewery's back patio, tucked under a space heater and sharing a soft pretzel the size of a steering wheel. Elise snapped a photo of the crowd inside, people dancing, talking, living. Do you ever think about her? She asked gently. Not accusing, just curious. Sometimes, I admit it. But not with anger. More like looking through a window into a house I don't live in anymore. She nodded. I get that. I looked at her. You ever think about him? She smirked. Only when I need motivation to finish an article. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. I don't think you saved me, I said quietly. I think I finally stopped trying to save the wrong person. She reached over and laced her fingers through mine. Same. I didn't need redemption. I didn't need some cinematic finish line. What I needed, what I found, was this, someone who saw me as I was, not for what I gave or what I earned. No trophies, no masks, no performances. Just two people under soft lights starting from zero. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough.